The desert stretched endlessly under the scorching sun, with sand dunes rolling like waves in an ocean of heat. The land was silent, save for the faint whisper of the wind that carried the scent of something burning. Amidst this unforgiving expanse, a lone figure stumbled, his body covered in dust and blood. His breaths came in ragged gasps. Each step he took a struggle against his weakening body. The human man was on the brink of death, but his resolve to survive burned brighter than the harsh sun above. His mission had failed, but the hope of returning home kept him moving, even as his vision blurred and his strength faded. He didn't know how long he had been walking, but he knew one thing: he was desperate, and he couldn't die here. In the distance, something caught his eye. Two figures, standing tall and resolute against the horizon. Their bodies were different, alien with blue skin that shimmered under the sun. They were unlike any human he had ever seen, their features both beautiful and intimidating. Their eyes locked onto him, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The woman on the left, taller and more muscular than the other, raised a hand in greeting. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but commanding, like the calm before a storm. "Are you injured?" she asked in a language he could not understand. The words, though foreign, carried an unmistakable tone of concern. The other alien, her expression more cautious, stepped forward, her eyes scanning the man's battered form. She knelt beside him, offering a hand to help him up. Her skin, a vibrant shade of blue, contrasted with the dusty desert beneath them. The warmth of her touch was like nothing he had ever felt before. A strange comfort in his time of need. The human's eyes fluttered, but he couldn't respond. He was too weak, too dehydrated, his body on the verge of collapse. The world around him began to spin, and he felt himself losing grip on consciousness. But then, just as he thought he might lose everything, the aliens lifted him up with ease. They moved together with a synchronized grace, working as one to support him. Their strength, their alien presence, filled him with awe, but also with fear. They were his saviors and his captors in the same breath. What did they want from him? Why had they come for him now? The woman with the softer eyes spoke again, her voice more urgent this time. "You are in danger. We can help, but you must trust us." She looked at her companion, who nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of her words. The man, still struggling to comprehend, felt a surge of panic. These creatures were not human, not like anyone he knew. But as they carefully guided him away from the desolate desert, he realized that he had no choice but to follow them. His life depended on it, and so, for the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to trust them. The desert disappeared behind them as they traveled deeper into the unknown. The human's thoughts were clouded, his fear growing with every step. What were they going to do with him? Were they saving him, or was he being taken to some unknown fate? He couldn't know, not yet, but there was something about their presence, something reassuring in the way they moved with purpose. The two alien women shared a glance, their eyes filled with silent communication. They knew what was coming, and they knew what they had to do. They were not just saving him. They were about to change his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. The man felt the pull of unconsciousness once more, his world fading into darkness. But even as he slipped away, he knew one thing: he had been found, and his story was far from over. The alien women guided the human through the vast desert, their steps sure and steady despite the harsh environment. The man's body was still weak, but their grip on him was firm and reassuring. His legs dragged beneath him, but he didn't fight their hold. He couldn't, not with the world spinning around him. His mind was clouded by the pain, but there was one thought that pierced through the haze. Why had they chosen to help him? The two aliens communicated in their strange language, words flowing like a river, but the human couldn't understand a single one. It was like they were speaking to each other, not him, yet he could feel their eyes constantly on him. Their gaze was intense, focused, as if they were studying him, trying to understand him. He shivered beneath the weight of it, even though the desert heat should have been unbearable. After what felt like an eternity, the landscape around them began to change. The dry, cracked earth turned into rocky terrain, and the distant mountains loomed larger. The man's legs began to buckle under him, and the aliens noticed immediately. Without a word, the one with the softer eyes lifted him up, holding him close to her chest. Her arms were strong but gentle, and as she held him, the human felt an odd sense of safety. The fear that had gripped him so tightly in the desert started to loosen, replaced by something else. They moved quickly, covering the distance between them and the shelter ahead. It was a structure made of stone, ancient-looking and yet perfectly intact. It stood in stark contrast to the barren landscape, as if it had always been there, waiting for someone. Inside, the air was cool, and the walls were adorned with strange symbols that glowed softly in the dim light. The atmosphere was unlike anything the man had ever experienced. He felt as though he had crossed into another world, one where he didn't belong. The aliens set him down on a bed made of thick woven fibers. It felt soft, almost too comfortable for a desert dwelling, and the human sank into it without thinking. His eyes closed, and for a moment, he thought he was dreaming. But the woman with the softer eyes knelt beside him, her expression unreadable. She placed a cool hand against his forehead, her fingers light and soothing. Her touch was unlike anything he had ever felt, and it calmed his racing heart. "Rest," she said, the first words in a language he could understand. "You are safe now." The human blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. His mind was still clouded, but her words carried a weight he couldn't ignore. He didn't know who they were, or what they wanted from him, but he knew one thing for certain. They weren't going to hurt him. The other alien stood by the doorway, watching them both closely. Her gaze never wavered, her eyes calculating, yet not unkind. She seemed to be the more stoic of the two, observing without speaking. As the human drifted into a restless sleep, the two aliens exchanged another glance, one that spoke volumes without a word. They knew the journey ahead would be long, and that the human was far from the only one with questions. But for now, they would wait. They would allow him to rest, to heal. The time for answers would come. But it was not yet. The human's dreams were filled with shadows, with strange faces and unfamiliar voices. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt this vulnerable, this uncertain. But even in his sleep, he could feel the presence of the two aliens, their protection a constant, quiet force. When he awoke, the shelter around him seemed less foreign. The walls still glowed faintly, and the air was still cool, but something about the place felt like home. He wasn't sure why. But the warmth from the aliens, from their care, began to settle into him. But as he lay there, recovering from the exhaustion that had gripped him, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. He had no idea what these creatures wanted, but deep inside, he felt that he would find out soon. He could only hope that their intentions were as pure as they seemed. The alien with the softer eyes entered the room again, her expression gentle yet serious. She approached him with a strange device in her hand, something he didn't recognize. The object glowed with a soft blue light, and it hummed with power. She placed it near his chest, just above his heart. The man tensed, unsure of what was happening. But before he could react, the device emitted a gentle pulse, sending a wave of warmth through his body. It was soothing, almost like a healing touch, and he felt the pain that had been seeping into his body slowly fade away. The alien's eyes softened as she watched him. "You will heal," she said, her voice as calm and reassuring as before. "But first, you must understand something. You are not alone anymore." The alien woman stood silently by the bed, her blue skin shimmering in the soft light of the room. The device she had used to heal him rested in her hands, its glow fading with the pulse of energy it had released. The human man lay still, his body no longer racked with pain, but his mind was still a storm of confusion. His eyes were open now, But the questions swirling in his mind remained unanswered. The other alien, who had kept her distance, approached slowly. Her eyes scanned the man as if reading his thoughts, as if understanding every question that ran through his mind. "You are not in danger," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You have been given shelter. You are safe here." The human's mind struggled to catch up with the words. He had heard her, but the meaning of what she said was far from clear. He had no idea where he was, or why they had saved him. The last thing he remembered was falling, his world spinning out of control. He had been in a battle, a war, but none of it seemed to matter now. The only thing that mattered was that he was alive. The alien with the softer eyes knelt beside him once again, her presence calming. "You are in our care now," she said. "We will not let you go." Her voice carried an unspoken promise, a vow that was more powerful than words. The man opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. His throat was dry, and his voice rasped as he tried to form a question. "Why help me?" The alien woman's gaze softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder, the warmth of her touch spreading through him. "Because you are not like them," she said. "You are different. You are a human, a species unlike any we have encountered before. You are strong, more than you know, and you are deserving of our help." The man's heart raced at her words. He had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable, but there was something about her tone, something in the way she looked at him, that made him believe her. The other alien stood silently by the door, watching them both. Her eyes were unreadable, but there was a certain intensity to her presence. She was waiting for something, though the human could not tell what. "We have seen your kind before," the alien woman continued, her voice becoming more serious. "But never like this, never with the strength that you carry. We have watched you struggle, watched your people fall, and yet you persist. That is why you are here, why you were chosen." The human blinked, his mind racing. He wanted to ask more, to know more, but the words still wouldn't come. Everything about this place was so different, so alien. The air, the atmosphere, the beings themselves. And yet, in some strange way, it felt right. "Who are you?" he finally managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where am I?" The alien woman's eyes flickered with something like understanding, as if she knew the human was struggling to piece everything together. "We are the Kahari," she said. "We come from a distant world, far from yours. This is our sanctuary, our home. And you, human, are here because you need to be." The human tried to sit up, but his body still felt weak. The healing energy from the device had done its work. But there was something else he couldn't shake, the feeling that his life was about to change forever. He had never encountered anything like this before. Not the war, not the people who fought beside him, and certainly not these aliens who were now caring for him. "You will stay with us," the alien woman said, as if reading his mind. "We have much to teach you, and you have much to offer us." Her gaze was intense, but there was no malice in her eyes. Instead, there was something deeper, something more ancient. The man swallowed, his mind struggling to comprehend her words. "I don't understand. What do you want from me?" The alien's smile was small, almost wistful. "We want to learn from you," she said. "We want to understand your kind, your strength, your resilience, your ability to survive against all odds. You have much to teach us, human." The man stared at her, his thoughts a swirl of confusion and fear. He didn't know what to make of this. He didn't know what they wanted, or if he could trust them. But there was something in her eyes, something that made him feel like he was meant to be here, like this was his path now. Whether he was ready for it or not, the silence stretched between them, heavy and full of unspoken words. The human didn't know what to say, but the alien woman seemed to understand. "Rest now," she said gently. "Tomorrow we will begin. You are safe here, and you are no longer alone." As the man lay back, his thoughts slowly drifting, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. He had no idea where this path would lead, or what it would cost him, but one thing was certain. His life had already been forever changed. The next morning, the human awoke to the sound of distant voices. The alien women were speaking to one another in their language, their words flowing like a melody. He couldn't understand a single word, but the tone was unmistakably calm. It was as if they were making decisions, planning something, but he could not quite grasp what. He tried to sit up, but his body still felt weak from the exhaustion of the past days. The healing device had worked, but it hadn't fully restored him. He could still feel the remnants of the battle in his muscles, the aching weariness in his bones. The alien woman with the soft eyes entered the room, her gaze falling on him with a quiet intensity. She smiled at him, though it was a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "How do you feel?" she asked. The human opened his mouth to respond, but his voice came out hoarse, barely audible. Better but not fully recovered. His throat felt dry, and his body still ached, but at least he could think clearly now. The alien nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It will take time for your body to heal," she said, "but you will be fine." She motioned for him to sit up, helping him gently as he tried to rise. Despite his weakness, the touch of her hands felt comforting, and he found himself leaning on her for support. "Where are we?" the human asked, his voice stronger now. The question had been on his mind since he had first awakened in the strange shelter. The alien looked at him for a long moment before answering. "You are in a place far from your world, a place where you will learn things that will change you forever." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The human blinked, trying to understand, but the more he thought about it, the more it confused him. What could they possibly teach him, and why? He was just a soldier, not someone special. The alien woman seemed to sense his confusion and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You do not understand yet," she said softly, "but you will in time. There are things about your kind, about humanity, that we need to know." The human's heart raced, his mind spinning. "What do you want from me?" The alien's gaze softened, and for the first time, he saw a hint of something close to compassion in her eyes. "We want to understand you, your strength, your survival, the way your kind fights, lives, and dies. We have watched you for a long time, but we do not know everything about your species. You are the key to something far greater, something that will help us all." The words felt like a weight on his chest, pressing down on him. He had no idea what she meant, but he couldn't ignore the sense that something much bigger than himself was at play here. The woman turned away, moving toward the door of the shelter. "We will begin your training soon," she said. "You must be prepared for what is to come." The human stared at her retreating figure, his thoughts swirling with questions. What kind of training? What did they want from him, and why now? A new presence filled the room as the other alien entered. She was quieter than the first, her movements deliberate and calculated. She didn't say a word, but her gaze was sharp, appraising. The man shifted uncomfortably under her watchful eye. There was something about her that felt different. She didn't seem as compassionate, but there was an intensity in her presence that made him uneasy. "Are you ready?" she finally asked, her voice low and calm. The human nodded slowly, unsure of what he was agreeing to. "Ready for what?" The alien gave him a look, as if his question were unnecessary. "The training, the tests, you will learn, but it will not be easy." The man swallowed, suddenly feeling the weight of his situation more acutely. He was trapped, far from home, and the aliens wanted something from him. But what? "I'll do whatever it takes to survive," the man said, his voice steady despite the fear creeping into his chest. "But I need to understand why you're helping me." The alien regarded him for a long moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You do not need to understand yet, but you will. The truth will come to you soon enough." She turned and walked toward the door. But before she left, she paused. "Prepare yourself. We begin soon." As the door closed behind her, the man was left alone with his thoughts. His mind raced with the possibilities, but no answers came. One thing was clear, though he wasn't going to be left alone. The aliens had plans for him, and whether he liked it or not, his journey was far from over. The shelter around him seemed even more alien now, as though the walls themselves were closing in on him. He didn't know where this path would lead, but he knew one thing: he wasn't in control anymore. The next day, the human was led outside. The desert stretched before him, but the air was cooler now, the heat of the sun tempered by the shelter's thick walls. The two alien women were by his side, their presence both reassuring and intimidating. They had said he was to be trained, but trained for what? What were they preparing him for? The one with the softer eyes spoke first, her voice calm but firm. "This will be your first test. We will see how well you adapt." The human's heart skipped. "A beat test? What kind of test?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The other alien, the more silent one, didn't answer right away. She simply watched him with her sharp, calculating eyes. It was as if she was measuring him, trying to figure out what he was capable of. Finally, she spoke, her words as direct as ever. "You will learn to survive in our world. This is the first step. We will push you to your limits, and you will either adapt or fail." The human's mind raced. He had no idea what they meant by surviving in their world. Everything here was foreign to him, from the desert landscape to the strange shelter, to the alien technology that surrounded him. But there was no choice but to follow. "How do I prepare?" he asked, his voice steady. He had no intention of backing down, no matter how uncertain he felt. The alien woman with the softer eyes placed a hand on his shoulder, her grip strong yet reassuring. "You are already prepared. Your body, your mind. They have been tested in ways you do not understand, but this world will challenge you in ways that you cannot yet imagine." The human nodded slowly, but deep inside, he felt a surge of doubt. Could he really survive here? Could he trust these aliens who had saved him only to force him into a training that felt more like a test of survival? Without another word, the two aliens led him deeper into the desert. The sand stretched endlessly, but there was no turning back. The human followed, his legs moving despite the lingering weakness in his body. He had no choice now. After what felt like an hour, they reached a rocky outcrop that overlooked the desert below. The two aliens stopped and turned to face him. "This is the place," the softer-eyed alien said. "Here, you will face the first of many challenges." The human looked around, scanning the environment. There was nothing special about it, just sand, rocks, and the endless sky above. But then, without warning, the ground beneath his feet began to shift. The earth trembled, and a massive sandstorm suddenly rose in the distance. The wind howled, and the sand whipped through the air with a fierce intensity. The storm was heading straight for them, and the aliens didn't seem concerned in the least. Instead, they waited for the human's reaction. He could feel the panic rising inside him. He had never seen anything like this before. He had been in combat situations, yes, but nothing like this. The storm seemed unnatural, its power overwhelming. "Survive." The alien with the softer eyes said simply, "Your first test has begun. You must make it through the storm." The human's mind raced. He had to think fast. He knew there were no options but to run, to find shelter, to do whatever it took to survive. The storm was too powerful to face head-on. He had to rely on what little he knew about survival, without hesitation. He turned and ran toward the nearest rocky outcrop, the sand stinging his skin as it lashed against him. The wind howled in his ears, the world around him becoming a blur of sand and dust. The storm closed in quickly, but the man kept moving. His legs burned, his body screamed for rest, but he couldn't stop. The aliens had given him no choice. This was his test, and failure was not an option. He reached the rocks and scrambled up, finding shelter in a small crevice just as the storm hit with full force. The roar of the wind filled his ears. But he was safe for now. He pressed himself against the stone, trying to steady his breath, his heart pounding. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The storm raged outside, its power relentless. But the human held his ground, his body shaking with exhaustion but unwilling to give up. This was his fight, his survival, and he would not let it slip away. Finally, the storm began to subside, its fury slowly fading into the distance. The human emerged from his shelter, covered in sand but alive. He had passed the first test. The alien women were waiting for him, their eyes watching his every move. "You survived," the silent one said, her voice betraying no emotion. "That is the first step. Now we will see if you can learn." The human stood tall, though his body ached with fatigue. He had survived the storm, but the real challenge was just beginning. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he was determined to face it. "You have passed," the softer-eyed alien said, her voice softening slightly. "But the next test will be harder." The human nodded, bracing himself for whatever came next. He had learned one thing. In this alien world, survival was the only rule that mattered. Asterisk. The next morning, the human woke with a sense of unease. The storm had passed, but the feeling of uncertainty still lingered. He had passed the first test, but he knew the hardest challenges were still ahead. The alien women had made it clear that survival was only the beginning. The alien with the softer eyes entered his room first, her expression unreadable. "Today we test your mind," she said. "You must face your greatest fears. We will show you things you have never seen, things you cannot yet understand." The human stared at her, his heart racing. He had been expecting another physical test, something that would challenge his strength or endurance. But this was different. "My mind?" he asked. "What does that mean?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured for him to follow her. "Come with me," she said. The human stood, feeling a knot of anxiety form in his stomach. He didn't know what they meant by testing his mind, but he knew one thing. He couldn't back down now. They walked through the shelter, past the stone walls that seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't explain. The air felt charged, as though something powerful was waiting to be unleashed. They reached a large room, dimly lit, the walls covered in glowing symbols. The human didn't recognize them, but they seemed to pulse with an energy that made his skin prickle. The silent alien stood in the corner, watching them both. She said nothing, but her eyes were sharp, taking in every movement the human made. The alien with the softer eyes turned to face him. "This room will show you your deepest fears. It will show you the things you have locked away in your mind. Be prepared." The human felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What do I have to do?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. "You need to face the images that will appear," the alien said. "They will test your resolve, your ability to confront what haunts you. Only then will you be ready for what comes next." Without another word, she stepped aside, and the walls of the room seemed to come alive. The symbols began to glow brighter, and the air seemed to thicken with energy. The human's heart pounded as he felt a strange pressure building around him. Suddenly, the room was filled with images. They came fast, one after another. Faces, places, and memories flashed in front of him. Some were familiar, others were unrecognizable, but each one stirred something deep within him, a fear, a pain, a sense of loss. He saw the faces of soldiers he had known, comrades he had fought beside, but now they were dead, their bodies lying lifeless on the battlefield. He saw their eyes filled with fear and pain, staring at him as if blaming him for their deaths. The images shifted. Now, he was standing alone in the middle of a destroyed city. The air was thick with smoke, and the ground was littered with debris. He heard cries of pain, the sound of destruction, but there was no one around to help. Only him. He felt his chest tighten, his breath quicken. The fear was overwhelming. the feeling of helplessness crushing him. He tried to move, but his legs wouldn't obey. He wanted to scream, but no sound came. Then, the images shifted again. This time, it was a memory he had locked away. His family, the ones he had lost. He saw their faces, their smiles, and felt the weight of the loss that had haunted him for so long. His heart ached with the realization that they were gone, and he could never bring them back. He stumbled backward, shaking. The images continued to assault him, each one more painful than the last. He wanted to escape, to run away from the pain. But the more he resisted, the more the images came. You must face them. A voice said from behind him. It was the alien with the softer eyes. You cannot run. You must confront your fears if you are to move forward. The human's mind was a whirlpool of emotions, but he forced himself to take a deep breath. He had faced death, battle, and the unknown, but this was different. This was his mind, his deepest, darkest fears. With trembling hands, he clenched his fists and shouted, "I will not be broken." The images stopped. The room fell silent, and the pressure that had been building around him slowly faded. The walls returned to their dim glow, and the air became lighter. The human stood, panting, his body drenched in sweat. He had done it. He had faced the fear that had haunted him for so long. He wasn't sure how he had managed it, but he had. The alien with the softer eyes approached him, her expression unreadable. "You have passed the test of the mind," she said. "You now understand what it means to face your fears. You are ready for what comes next." The human nodded, his body still shaking from the experience. He had learned something important in that room. The fear that had once held him back no longer had control over him. But as he stood there, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just one small step in a much larger journey. He had faced his mind's greatest challenge, but there were still more tests ahead. He was not done yet, and whatever lay ahead, he would face it head-on. Asterisk. The days that followed were filled with more tests. Each challenge brought the human closer to his breaking point. He was pushed to his limits, forced to confront not only his fears, but also his weaknesses. Every trial had been difficult, but none had been as relentless as this one. The alien women watched him constantly, their eyes never leaving him, measuring his every move. The softer-eyed alien had become his constant guide, but the silent one, the more stoic of the two, remained distant, always watching but never speaking. Today was different though. The air in the shelter felt heavier, charged with a new energy. The human could sense it. Something was about to change. He had no idea what the next trial would be, but he had learned enough to understand that it would be unlike anything he had faced before. The alien with the softer eyes approached him, her expression solemn. "Today is your final trial," she said. "You will face the hardest challenge yet, the one that will test your very soul." The human stood tall. Despite the exhaustion that weighed heavily on his body, he had made it this far, and he wasn't about to back down now. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady. She nodded, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. "Very well," she said. "Follow me." The two aliens led him outside. But this time, the landscape was different. Instead of the barren desert, they had arrived at a dense, dark forest. The air was thick with the scent of earth and moisture, and the sounds of strange creatures filled the air. The human's heart began to race. He wasn't sure what to expect, but everything about this place felt unnatural. The trees were unlike any he had ever seen. Their trunks twisted and gnarled, with vines that seemed to pulse with life. The shadows were deep, and the air was cool, making him feel a chill he couldn't shake. The softer-eyed alien turned to face him, her gaze intense. "This forest is alive," she said, "and it is not forgiving. The trial will test your ability to survive in this environment. You must navigate through the forest and reach the center. There, you will find the final test." The human nodded, his mind already processing the information. He had no idea what awaited him, but he could sense that the trial was about to begin. Without another word, the alien stepped back, giving him space. "Go," the soft-eyed alien said. "You have no time to waste." The human stepped forward, his boots crunching against the thick undergrowth. As he moved deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, the shadows more oppressive. The trees seemed to close in on him, their twisted branches reaching out like hands. He tried to steady his breathing, but the forest seemed to pulse with an energy that made it hard to focus. The atmosphere felt thick, suffocating, as though the very land was watching him. The further he went, the more disoriented he became. Every step felt like a battle. The ground was uneven, the foliage dense, and the creatures that lurked in the shadows made unsettling noises. He couldn't see them, but he could feel their presence. Minutes turned into hours as he navigated the dark forest. His legs ached, his body screaming for rest, but he pushed on. He knew he had no choice. There was no turning back. Suddenly, the air around him seemed to change. The temperature dropped, and the sounds of the forest fell silent. The darkness deepened, and the trees closed in on him. The human's heart pounded as he realized that he was no longer alone. From the shadows, a figure emerged. It was tall, its features indistinct in the darkness, but it moved with the grace of a predator. The human froze, his instincts telling him to run, but he didn't have the time. The figure stepped closer, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. "Who are you?" the human demanded, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to stay calm. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a hand, and the world around the human seemed to warp. The trees twisted, the ground shook, and the forest became a blur of motion. The human's vision swam, and he felt himself falling. When he hit the ground, everything went dark. When the human regained consciousness, he found himself lying on the cold, uneven ground. His body was sore, every muscle protesting the strain it had endured. He pushed himself up, his mind still clouded by the strange, shifting darkness he had just encountered. The forest around him was eerily silent. The oppressive air from before was gone, replaced by a calm stillness. The trees were no longer twisted and threatening. Instead, they seemed almost serene, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. He stood, his body aching, but he forced himself to move. The trial wasn't over. He had to keep going. There was something deep in his chest, something primal, urging him forward. As he walked through the forest, the silence was overwhelming. He could hear his own breath, the sound of his boots hitting the soft earth. But there was no other noise. No creatures, no wind, no movement. It was as though the world had gone completely still. Minutes passed, but the human kept moving, his thoughts racing. He had faced many trials since arriving in this strange land, but nothing had prepared him for this. The forest, the figures, the strange sensations. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Soon, he reached the center of the forest. There, standing before him, was a stone altar. It was ancient, its surface covered in glowing symbols that pulsed with a soft light. The air around the altar hummed, vibrating with an energy he could feel. Deep in his chest, the human approached cautiously, his hand instinctively reaching out to touch the stone. As his fingers made contact, the symbols on the altar flared to life, and a voice filled the air. It was deep and resonant, echoing through the forest. "Welcome, human," the voice said. "You have proven your strength, your resilience, and your ability to survive. You have faced the trials of the body and the mind, but now comes the hardest test of all." The human stood still, his heart racing. "What is the test?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. The voice responded, its tone shifting. "You must choose. You have been given power, the power to change the course of your destiny. But with this power comes responsibility, and you must decide how to use it." The human's mind raced. Power? Responsibility? He had come here as a soldier, someone who only wanted to survive. But now, it seemed as though everything had changed. The aliens had given him a chance to change, but he didn't know what the right choice was. How do I choose? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. The voice did not answer immediately. Instead, the symbols on the altar shifted, revealing an image. It was a vision of his world, Earth. He saw his home, the people he had fought alongside, the loved ones he had lost. The image flickered, showing glimpses of both destruction and hope. The fate of his world rested in the balance, and it was up to him to decide how it would unfold. The human's chest tightened. He had always felt like an outsider, someone caught between worlds. But now the fate of everything, his home, his people, was in his hands. He was not just a soldier anymore. He was something more. You have the power to lead your people, the voice said, but only if you can overcome your doubts. You must decide. Will you protect what remains of your world, or will you choose another path, one that could bring peace or destruction? The human stared at the vision before him. It was a decision he had never imagined making. He had always fought for survival, but now he was being asked to fight for something greater, for the future of his world, for the future of all humanity. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes as he considered the choices before him. In that moment, he understood what the trial had truly been. It was not about strength or survival. It was about the choices we make, the responsibility we take on, and the legacy we leave behind. The human opened his eyes and stepped forward, placing his hands on the altar. I choose to protect my world, he said, his voice steady. I will fight for my people, and I will do whatever it takes to ensure that they have a future. The symbols on the altar flared brightly, and a surge of energy coursed through the human. He felt it fill his body, his mind, his soul. He had made his choice. The forest around him seemed to breathe, the trees shifting as though in approval. The air was lighter, the oppressive weight that had hung over him lifting. The voice spoke again, softer now, but still filled with power. You have chosen wisely, human. Your journey is not over, but you have proven yourself. The power you have gained will guide you, and your decisions will shape the future. The human stood tall, his body filled with new energy. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready. He had faced the hardest trial of all, and he had emerged stronger. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He was no longer just a soldier, he was a leader, and he would fight for the future of his people. Asterisk.